What if I told you that one of humanity's most advanced civilizations didn't fall to conquest, disease, or natural disaster, but to something far more sinister? Something that made millions of people abandon their magnificent cities, their temples, their gods, and vanish into the jungle forever? Picture this: sprawling metropolises with populations rivaling modern New York, suddenly empty. Stone pyramids reaching toward the heavens, abandoned overnight. Complex irrigation systems that fed millions, left to decay. The Maya didn't just disappear, they fled. And what they were running from will make your blood run cold. For over 1,000 years, archaeologists have fed us comfortable lies about climate change and political upheaval. But recently uncovered evidence reveals a truth so disturbing that it's been deliberately buried. The Maya collapse wasn't gradual. It was a catastrophic sprint toward oblivion that began with whispers in royal courts and ended with entire bloodlines extinct. Tonight, we're diving into the darkest chapter of Mesoamerican history. We'll uncover the real reason why the most sophisticated civilization in the Americas chose mass exodus over staying to fight. Because what they discovered about their own rulers, their own gods, and their own future was too horrifying to face. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to have everything you thought you knew about ancient civilizations completely shattered. And leave a comment below. Have you ever heard theories about what really happened to the Maya? Because after tonight, you'll never look at those mysterious jungle ruins the same way again. The official story sounds almost romantic in its simplicity. Between 800 and 900 AD, the classic Maya civilization experienced what scholars politely call the collapse. Textbooks describe it as a slow decline caused by overpopulation, deforestation, and extended droughts. Environmental stress, they say, led to political instability, which led to warfare, which led to societal breakdown. This narrative paints the Maya as victims of their own success. Too many people, too little rain, too much conflict. Archaeological evidence seems to support this. Abandoned cities showing signs of rapid depopulation, defensive walls hastily constructed around urban centers, and a sudden stop in monument construction that had continued for centuries. The Maya weren't primitive. Their mathematical and astronomical achievements surpassed those of contemporary Europe. They invented the concept of zero independently, created the most accurate calendar in human history, and predicted solar eclipses with precision that wouldn't be matched for another 1,000 years. Their cities were engineering marvels with sophisticated water management systems that could support populations of over 100,000 people. At their peak, Maya territory stretched across modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. Major cities like Tikal, Calakmul, and Caracol weren't just population centers. They were powerful city-states that controlled vast trade networks reaching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific coast. Jade, obsidian, cacao, and precious feathers flowed through Maya markets, while their merchants established colonies as far away as central Mexico. Their society was stratified but not stagnant. Commoners could rise through military service or craft specialization. Women held significant power, with several ruling as queens in their own right. The Maya practiced a form of democracy in their city councils, and their legal system was sophisticated enough to handle complex inheritance disputes and commercial contracts. Maya religion seemed to provide stability and meaning to millions of lives. Their pantheon included hundreds of deities, governing everything from rain and corn to war and childbirth. Elaborate ceremonies marked every important transition, from royal coronations to seasonal agricultural cycles. The Maya believed they lived in the fourth world, with 3 previous worlds having been destroyed by the gods. This cosmology gave them a sense of continuity and divine purpose that had sustained their civilization for over 2 millennia. But this comfortable academic narrative begins to crumble when you examine what really happened in those final decades. Because the Maya collapse wasn't a slow decline, it was a terrified stampede. Recent archaeological discoveries reveal evidence that mainstream scholars have been reluctant to discuss. In city after city, excavations uncover the same horrifying pattern. Entire residential districts abandoned within single generations, household goods left behind as if people fled in the middle of daily activities. And most disturbing of all, massive ritual deposits of broken ceremonial objects. The Maya didn't just stop building monuments, they actively destroyed them. At dozens of sites, archaeologists find evidence of systematic demolition carried out by the Maya themselves. Stelae commemorating royal achievements were toppled and smashed. Temple facades were stripped of their sacred decorations. Most shocking of all, royal tombs were opened and their contents scattered or burned. This wasn't random vandalism. It was methodical desecration carried out by people who understood exactly what they were destroying. The Maya were erasing their own history, their own identity, their own connection to the divine realm. But why would a deeply religious people commit such sacrilege? The answer lies in a discovery that archaeologists have tried to downplay for decades. In the final layers of Maya cities, just before abandonment, we find evidence of practices that violate every principle of Maya religious law. Mass human sacrifice on a scale never before seen. Children's bodies buried in foundation deposits of hastily constructed defensive walls. And most disturbing, evidence of cannibalism in royal palace complexes. Maya kings weren't just waging war, they were consuming their enemies. Elite burial chambers from this period contain human remains showing clear evidence of ritual dismemberment and consumption. Chemical analysis of cooking vessels reveals human protein residues. Bone tools made from human femurs and skulls show signs of extended use in royal households. The Maya had rules about death and the afterlife that were absolutely sacred. The dead were to be honored, their spirits guided to the underworld through proper ritual. Cannibalism violated the fundamental order of the universe. It trapped souls in the world of the living and invited catastrophic divine retribution. But the horror goes deeper. Hieroglyphic inscriptions from the collapse period, deciphered only in recent decades, describe visions and prophecies that terrified Maya scribes into recording warnings for future generations. Kings claim to receive messages from gods demanding ever more extreme sacrifices. Royal astronomers calculated dates of cosmic significance that required blood offerings on unprecedented scales. Maya rulers weren't losing their minds. They were following a religious logic that demanded the destruction of their own people to prevent something far worse. The question that haunted every Maya city in those final years was simple. What could be worse than what they were already doing? The answer comes from understanding one man whose name has been deliberately obscured from popular histories of the Maya collapse. His royal title translates as he who speaks with the smoking mirror, and his decisions in the final decades of the 9th century AD set in motion events that would destroy dozens of cities and scatter millions of people across Mesoamerica. This king ruled from Calakmul, one of the two superpowers of the Maya world. Historical records describe him as brilliant, but obsessed with astronomical calculations and divine prophecy. Unlike other Maya rulers who focused on conquest and trade, he who speaks with the smoking mirror dedicated his reign to understanding what he believed were urgent messages from the gods about the approaching end of the Fourth World. Maya cosmology predicted that their current world would end just as the previous three had ended, through divine destruction brought on by human failure to maintain cosmic balance. This king became convinced that the end was imminent, and that only extreme measures could prevent or delay it. His astronomical calculations pointed to specific dates when reality itself would become unstable, when the boundaries between the human world and the underworld would collapse. Starting around 870 AD, he who speaks with the smoking mirror began implementing religious reforms that horrified traditional Maya priests. He ordered the construction of new temples designed not to honor the gods, but to contain them. He established ritual calendars that required daily human sacrifice rather than the traditional seasonal offerings. Most controversially, he declared that royal bloodlines were no longer sufficient for divine communication, that the gods now demanded the blood of children, specifically children of noble families from allied cities. Other Maya kingdoms initially dismissed these claims as the ravings of a mad king. But when Calakmul's armies began demanding tribute in the form of children rather than gold or jade, the political landscape of the Maya world changed forever. City-states that had maintained peaceful relations for centuries suddenly found themselves forced to choose between civil war and complicity in practices their own priests declared abominable. The king's own records, carved in stone and hidden in sealed chambers beneath Calakmul's main pyramid, described visions that drove his increasingly desperate measures. He claimed that in dreams, the smoking mirror, a deity associated with conflict and divination, showed him scenes of cosmic horror. The Fourth World wasn't just ending, it was being consumed by entities from previous destroyed worlds, beings of pure hunger that fed on human terror and pain. According to these inscriptions, the king believed that by feeding these entities through ritual sacrifice, he could negotiate a survival pact for his people. The children weren't victims. They were ambassadors sent to bargain with forces beyond human comprehension. Their screams and terror were languages that these cosmic predators understood. Their blood was currency in transactions that determined whether the Maya would survive the transition to a fifth world or be consumed entirely. As word of these practices spread throughout the Maya region, the response was swift and devastating. City after city turned against Calakmul, not just politically, but religiously. Maya priests declared he who speaks with the smoking mirror to be possessed by malevolent spirits. They proclaimed that his attempts to bargain with cosmic destroyers had actually accelerated the end of the Fourth World. But the real horror began when other cities started reporting similar visions among their own royal astronomers and priests. The contagion of cosmic terror spread faster than any army could march. Within a decade of he who speaks with the smoking mirror's first reforms, Maya kings across the region were receiving similar divine communications. The gods weren't just speaking to one mad ruler, they were broadcasting a universal message of approaching apocalypse that demanded immediate and extreme response. City-states that had condemned Calakmul's practices found themselves implementing identical measures. Children disappeared from noble households. Royal courts established new positions for officials whose only job was to identify and procure suitable sacrificial victims. Maya artists, renowned for their realistic portrayals of human faces and bodies, suddenly began creating artwork depicting humans as prey animals being hunted by shadow creatures with too many teeth. The psychological impact on Maya society was catastrophic. Parents in noble families lived in constant terror that their children would be selected for royal sacrifices. Commoners, initially spared from the worst practices, found themselves subjected to random raids as the demand for victims escalated beyond what the elite could provide. Trust between social classes, the foundation of Maya civilization, completely collapsed. But the true horror wasn't the sacrifice itself, it was what happened afterward. Maya priests, trained in generations of religious tradition, began reporting that the rituals weren't working. The cosmic entities weren't satisfied. They demanded more elaborate offerings, more creative forms of suffering, more intimate access to human fear and despair. Kings who had initially believed they were buying time for their people found themselves trapped in escalating cycles of religious violence. Each failed sacrifice required a more extreme follow-up. Each disappointed deity demanded compensation through additional victims. The astronomical calculations that had once provided Maya rulers with cosmic certainty now became algorithms for determining how much human suffering would be required to prevent universal destruction. Records from Tikal describe the final months of that great city in terms that sound like horror fiction. The king ordered the construction of sacrifice platforms in residential neighborhoods. Families were required to attend weekly rituals where their neighbors and relatives were publicly tortured and killed. Children were trained from infancy to expect selection for sacrifice as the highest honor they could achieve. The most disturbing evidence comes from residential areas where archaeologists have found entire families buried together with signs of simultaneous death. Not from violence, but from what appears to be mass poisoning. These weren't murder victims. These were Maya families who chose suicide rather than continue living in a world where their own religion had become a machinery for producing suffering. Maya mathematical precision, their greatest intellectual achievement, had been turned into a tool for calculating optimal pain. Their astronomical expertise, which had connected them to cosmic rhythms for centuries, now served only to schedule atrocities. Their sophisticated writing system, capable of recording complex philosophical and historical ideas, was reduced to keeping tallies of victims and documenting new techniques for extracting maximum terror before death. The final inscriptions from He Who Speaks with the Smoking Mirror's Reign, carved in increasingly frantic hieroglyphs, reveal a man who had realized the true nature of his cosmic communications. The entities speaking to him weren't gods trying to prevent the end of the world. They were the end of the world, feeding on the destruction of human civilization through the manipulation of religious faith. His last recorded words, found in a sealed chamber that wasn't opened until 1987, translate roughly as, I have fed the darkness that devours light. I have taught the void to speak in sacred voices. The gods we served were never gods. They were hunger itself, learning to wear divine faces. May the fifth world forget our names and burn our cities before they repeat our mistakes. The collapse came not through conquest or natural disaster, but through mass psychological break. Entire populations, traumatized beyond their capacity to function, simply walked away from cities that had become stages for cosmic horror. They abandoned sophisticated water systems, gave up their trade networks, and scattered into the jungle rather than continue participating in a civilization that demanded they torture their own children to appease imaginary monsters. Archaeological evidence from the final years shows a pattern repeated across dozens of cities: systematic destruction of religious art and architecture, mass graves containing sacrificial victims, and then sudden abandonment. The Maya didn't fade away gradually. They ran screaming into the wilderness to escape what their own religion had become. But the most chilling discovery comes from recent excavations at Calakmul itself. In the deepest chambers beneath the main pyramid, archaeologists found evidence that he who speaks with the smoking mirror continued his sacrificial practices even after his city was abandoned. Alone in the empty ruins with no subjects to rule and no enemies to fight, he carved increasingly incoherent inscriptions while building altar after altar for sacrifices that no living person witnessed. The final chamber, sealed with stones from the outside, contains his mummified remains surrounded by the bones of hundreds of victims. Carbon dating suggests these sacrifices continued for years after Calakmul's official abandonment. The king who had claimed to bargain with cosmic destroyers had become one himself, feeding on death in empty ruins while the civilization he had helped to destroy grew green with jungle vines. The Maya collapse wasn't the end of Maya people. Millions of their descendants live throughout Mesoamerica today. But it was the end of Maya civilization as a coherent system capable of supporting large-scale urban societies. The survivors, traumatized by what their religion had become, deliberately abandoned the astronomical calculations, the complex writing systems, and the urban planning techniques that had defined Maya achievement for over 2 millennia. Today, Maya ruins attract millions of tourists who admire the mathematical precision of their architecture and the artistic sophistication of their sculpture. Guidebooks describe the collapse as a historical mystery that archaeologists are still working to solve. They don't mention the evidence for mass human sacrifice, the inscriptions describing cosmic horror, or the psychological trauma that scattered millions of people across Central America. Modern Maya communities preserve traditional practices and beliefs that connect them to their ancestral heritage. But ask about the collapse period, and you'll encounter a cultural silence that's been maintained for over 1,000 years. The descendants of the Maya don't consider their ancestors' abandonment of the great cities to be a historical mystery. They consider it to be a successful escape from religious practices that had become incompatible with human survival. Recent climate research has confirmed that the 9th century AD did experience severe droughts across the Maya region. Political instability and warfare did increase during the collapse period. These factors contributed to the crisis, but they don't explain the specific pattern of religious violence and systematic cultural destruction that characterizes the end of classic Maya civilization. The real lesson of the Maya collapse isn't about environmental limits or geopolitical complexity. It's about what happens when religious authority becomes separated from moral accountability. The Maya developed sophisticated systems for astronomical calculation, architectural engineering, and social organization. But they never developed effective safeguards against religious leaders who claimed divine authorization for increasingly extreme demands. Archaeological evidence suggests that similar patterns of religious escalation and cultural self-destruction have occurred in other civilizations throughout human history. The challenge for modern societies isn't just learning from Maya achievements in mathematics and astronomy. It's understanding how sophisticated, rational people can be manipulated into participating in their own cultural suicide through the exploitation of religious faith and cosmic anxiety. The jungle has reclaimed most Maya cities, turning sophisticated urban centers into mysterious ruins that archaeologists explore one chamber at a time. But the most important Maya ruins aren't made of stone. They're the traumatic memories passed down through generations of survivors who chose exile over complicity in horror. Subscribe to our channel for more investigations into the dark truths behind historical mysteries, and leave a comment below. After learning what really happened to the Maya, do you think modern civilizations have developed better safeguards against similar manipulation? Or are we just as vulnerable to leaders who claim divine authorization for extreme measures? Because the patterns that destroyed Maya civilization are still recognizable in our world today.